Hi guys, it's about 3:20 a.m. East and excuse me, Easton. It's about 2:20 a.m. Central on this Wednesday, August 22nd, 2012. Well, I'm going to be making two videos today, one on Tropical Storm Isaac and another on the weather across the country. Now, Tropical Storm Isaac, what's going on with him? Well, he is currently just to the east of the Lesser Antilles. And he is going to continue to work its way in a westerly direction and eventually move a little bit more in a northwesterly direction. There are already hurricane watches that are out in Puerto Rico. As time moves its way onward, it looks like he will be moving in a northwesterly direction. Now, if this is a hurricane and this does hit Florida, this would be the first hurricane to hit Florida. Get this, and I made sure I looked up my information here. First hurricane to hit Florida since 2005. And the last time a hurricane hit Florida was, the last hurricane to hit Florida was Wilma back in October of 2005. So, yeah, it's been quite some time, 7 years. Now, between that 7-year period, there has been tropical storms that have hit Florida, and some of those tropical storms have caused some pretty significant damage. Particularly, most recently, Debbie, which hit back in June. That was a very nasty situation. I mean, some regions picked up almost 30 inches of rain. Absolutely phenomenal amounts of rain. I mean, it was really nasty. But overall, I mean, the U.S. in general hasn't seen that many major hurricanes over the past 7 years. I mean, we had that one crazy year back in 2005, and then after that, it seems like everything has just been, I mean, the U.S. hasn't really been seeing a lot of major hurricanes. I mean, we have seen hurricanes, and most recently, Irene last year, but, I mean, there just hasn't been many, the hurricanes are not, 2005 was a serious year, but then after that, it seems like things haven't really been as severe when it comes in terms of hurricanes. Now, not to say that Irene wasn't severe. I mean, that was really bad, but it's not Katrina bad. Katrina, I mean, that was probably one of the worst scenarios that could have ever came about. I mean, really, really bad hurricane, and caused significant amounts of damage, and just ruined New Orleans and practically ripped it to shreds. But overall, it's pretty interesting just to kind of put out that piece of information. But in a few minutes, I'm going to actually show you something that's kind of interesting, and I think people may like to see, because it's definitely a very important piece of information. So, these are the models, and this is what they're thinking when it comes in terms of tracks, and this is definitely a lot different than yesterday or the day before. If you remember, the day before, some of the models had it going out into portions of the Gulf. Some of them had it going into Florida. They were all over the place. This particular point, a lot of the models have this going into Florida, and even some of them have it turning in a more northwesterly direction towards the East Coast, particularly the Canadian. Now, I'd like to see what the Canadian is saying when it comes in terms of intensities, but they don't have that. For some reason, the intensity for the Canadian hasn't really been working too well, so I don't have that information for you. But I can say the track for the Canadian is a pretty interesting track, to say the least. The intensities, though, are looking somewhat like this. And overall, I do believe very, very strongly that this thing will at least become a weak hurricane. Overall, you can see generally over the next several days this thing really increasing. And depending upon the track, it could, and really it depends upon the track that Isaac wants to take. Could it become our first major hurricane of the year? It's a possibility. But I'm not saying that it will, but I am not saying that it won't either. We'll just have to see as time moves itself onward. The GFS ensembles have really, things have turned around here. The GFS was really saying that this thing was going to move in a northwesterly direction, and they were actually seeming like they were pretty consistent for a time there. Now, things have turned. The models are a little bit more on the consistent side, to where the GFS ensembles are all over the place. Some of them are saying it's going to move to the north and west and maybe affect portions of the northeast. Some of them are saying it's going to go into Florida. Some of them are saying it's going to go into the Gulf Coast. So I think you can understand why I'm kind of not really agreeing with the GFS at this particular point, because they're really all over the place. Okay, here's the GFS intensities, and they do say that this thing has a chance of becoming a hurricane. Overall, though, I think if you look at the general trend, it is increasing in intensity. So I think we can all agree that this thing will increase in intensity over the next 24 hours. Chris, actually, before we talk about Chris, this is what we call analogs. And what this does is it takes the current position, the current intensity of Isaac, and what it does is it produces storms that were in a similar or nearby location, and it puts out their location and also of similar intensity, and puts out the tracks of those storms, and these are the top 10 that come out. The first one on this list is Chris. Chris is this one right here, and I will highlight it for you. Very interesting track here. Very interesting. This is a track that's very much different than, what we were seeing even yesterday. It has it taken a sharp northwest turn. It has it going through the Dominican Republic and then really scraping the coast of Florida and then moving inland and then going up towards New England and giving us here in New England some rain and the East Coast. Whether or not it takes a track like Chris, I'm not sure, but it's definitely a possibility at this point that I'm not ruling out. Fiona is the second, which Fiona took a track, which was back in 2010, moved something like that. It didn't do much damage, but at this particular point, it doesn't look like it'll be doing too much of this particular stuff, where it just goes out to sea and dissipates, I guess you can sort of say. It doesn't look like that'll happen. So, and then there is one storm that was of similar intensity and location that moved out into Mexico. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Very, very minimal chance that will happen. Now, let's take a step backward here. And let's go back about a year. Here's a little bit of a blast from the past here. This is Tropical Storm Irene and her first advisory, or her first track that the National Hurricane Center put out. Now, I want you to look at this very closely, and I want you to look at how similar this is to the current track that Isaac has at this particular point. Look at it very, very carefully. Okay, this is Isaac's track. This is Irene's track that they put out. It's practically a mirror image. Maybe the only thing, and this is the very first update or first advisory, so there's no hurricane watches here. This is update number 4 for Tropical Storm Isaias. So, the major difference is that there's hurricane watches in Puerto Rico, and here there is not. But if you look at the tropical storm warnings, I mean, they're in the same location. And then you look at the tropical storm warnings in the Lesser Antilles, and yeah, they may go down a little bit more south with Isaias, but I mean, overall, if you just generally look at how Isaias is and the track that they have out at this particular point, and Irene, it's almost a mirror image of each other. So I think you could probably see why I may be a little bit on the concern side. So, at this particular point, this is my particular track that I made. The question at this point is what's the chances of it hitting the Gulf Coast? Because I know there's some people out in the Gulf Coast saying, is there a chance that it could hit the Gulf Coast? There's a chance, but at this particular point, I would actually say there's more of a chance that it will actually hit New England or North Carolina even than it does the Gulf Coast. At this particular time, I don't see a high likelihood of that happening. Is it possible? It's definitely possible. But at this particular point, I don't see too many models suggesting that it will move, other than some of the GFS ensembles saying that this will move into the Gulf of Mexico. And other than some of the GFS and again, the GFS ensembles are just all over the place. But most of the models are indicating that this will not go into the Gulf of Mexico. And like I said, I believe that there's actually a much higher chance that this could go up the East Coast than go into the Gulf of Mexico at this particular point. Now, at this particular point, it looks like the highest it will become is a Category 1 80-mile-an-hour hurricane. Now, the question comes about, what if it doesn't take this track? What if it goes, let's say, the outermost west track, or something similar to the outermost west track that I have here? Well, then guess what? It will not be just a Category 1 80-mile-an-hour hurricane. We may be talking about a Category 2, Category 3, 110 to 150, we'll say 110 to 115 mile an hour hurricane rather than an 80 mile an hour Category 1 hurricane. So we're going to have to see how things work through time, and there's definitely plenty of time for things to update. But what I also want you to do is take a check on Irene and when it became a tropical storm. Do you see how similar the time period is here? I mean, it's only a matter of a couple days here. I mean, Isaias became a tropical storm yesterday, sometime I think in the morning, and this became a tropical storm on the 20th, generally in the evening. So overall, I mean, these two storms are very similar in time. Their time period of when they developed into a tropical storm is very close. Whether or not they're going to take a similar path, and whether or not they're going to cause the same damage, and whether or not they're going to become the same intensity, that is yet to be determined. But I want to bear on the side of caution here that this could possibly go up the East Coast, and if it does, could possibly cause similar, if not worse, damage than Irene. So I want everyone to understand that, and at this particular point, I know everyone's going to start asking, whether or not this will hit New England. Just ask away, but at this particular point, I don't want everyone to start thinking it will hit New England, even the East Coast, because it possibly couldn't. Okay, so I just want everyone to understand that at this particular time, it looks like it'll hit Florida, but it could change. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your Wednesday, and actually I will have another video out on my forecast across the country. I hope you all check that one out as well. Take care, everyone.